In other news, Donald Trump says he has asked the Justice Department to investigate convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein's ties to many other high-profile figures. In a post on Truth Social, the US president said he would ask Attorney General Pam Bondi and the FBI to look into Epstein's links to top Democrats, including former President Bill Clinton. His request follows the release by Congress of emails raising new questions about President Trump's ties to the convicted sex offender. Bondi has confirmed she will launch the investigation on Trump's orders. I'd like to welcome Michael A. Genovese now, Professor of Political Science at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. Welcome to you. Donald Trump has repeatedly accused Democrats of pushing what he's described as the Epstein hoax. Now he's pushing for the Justice Department to investigate people like Bill Clinton and others. Is that a legitimate thing to do, or is it deflecting from what are growing questions about Trump's ties to Jeffrey Epstein?
It is highly unusual. It is historically not quite unprecedented, but almost unprecedented. And it may very well be an act of desperation as much as it is an act of hope. But it's probably too late. I mean, the president has ordered the attorney general to investigate Democrats. He named Democrats that he wants investigated. That's just not done. But the momentum has already built up. The public desperately is clamoring for the release of these documents. Is Donald Trump being too clever by half? Because if the Justice Department is investigating someone for potential criminal activity, they can refuse to release the documents. And so just as Congress is about to pass a resolution saying release the documents, which will be bipartisan in the vote, Donald Trump is now trying to put up a roadblock saying, well, sorry, we can't release them. You're not going to get anything. But he's trying to have it both ways to say that there's nothing here, but the Democrats did it. You can't have it both ways.
I want to talk to you about what you've described as momentum in a moment. But firstly, the White House has defended Trump since around 23,000 pages of documents from the so-called Epstein files were released. Now, at least 2 emails suggest that him and Epstein may have been in contact long after Trump said they weren't anymore. Trump, as we know, denies any wrongdoing. But what could or should we take away from this?
I'd be careful and cautious about how far I take this. Just have to remember, this is the beginning of the process. It's like the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of material that is yet to be released, may never be released. Donald Trump is trying to prevent that from happening. But there's so many more emails, so much more that's there that we haven't seen. And that will be the problem for Donald Trump. It could be a drip, 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 day after day of damaging information. Guilt by implication, guilt by association, perhaps. But there's just so much there that, in a way, it would be wise to simply hold off judgment until we know more.
OK, so you're advocating caution. Now, Trump has gone from saying he'd release the files if elected to now resisting doing so, as you've said. But even some of Trump's Republican supporters, I'm thinking of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, they've been calling for the files to be released. Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, there were a few Republicans who wanted release, but there weren't enough. Now there are enough to have the Congress ordered release of all the documents. The good thing, I suppose, for the House and who is voting on this is that once they reach the number required to release the documents, a bunch of other Republicans jumped on board. They don't want to be part of the obstruction. And so there's an incredible momentum. There's an incredibly high expectation built into this. And the public is clamoring, demanding to know more. There's very serious accusations. And there are a lot of big names, Democrats and Republicans, who are being implicated, some because their names appear in already released documents, some because they suspect they might be in there. So there's a big story yet to be uncovered.
As you say, there seem to be many people, or there could be many people implicated in this, given that Epstein's had connection to politicians of various different leanings. Do you think both Republicans and Democrats have to worry about what could be revealed?
There's an ample blame to go around, it looks like. Both parties have members who will be named. But let's remember the juiciest target is always the president, no matter who the president is. And there's no escaping the question of what level of damage will this do Donald Trump? Even if there's smoke but no fire, even if there's no what we used to call in the Watergate crisis, no smoking gun, by implication, he's still going to be suffering. So there are going to be a lot of worried Democrats and Republicans in Washington, D.C., because this is a career ender for many of them.
Thank you so much for your time today. That's Michael A. Genovese, Professor of Political Science at Loyola Marymount University. It's great to welcome Timothy Hagle back now. He's Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Iowa. Welcome back to you. Now, a political scientist, Michael Genovese, I spoke to earlier on this program, he described this move by Trump as possibly, quote, an act of desperation as much as it is an act of hope. His reasoning was because having a Justice Department investigation into certain individuals may mean that the department can refuse to release these documents. I'm interested, what's your take?
I think that there's certainly some validity to that, because we've seen in the past where you have some particular ongoing investigation that for security reasons, to make sure that the investigation is going to go forward appropriately, that they'll refuse, they being the government will refuse to release the information. And so maybe there's something along these lines. I'm not sure that I would go so far as to say that this is necessarily an act of desperation on the part of Trump, because that may or may not be his reason for pushing the investigation. I think it may also be partly because he's getting tired of the Democrats trying to connect him to Jeffrey Epstein, despite some evidence to the contrary, including the emails that the Democrats put out recently, which almost seem to suggest the opposite of what the Democrats intended. And so now it's perhaps Trump's turn to say, all right, let's turn the tables on the Democrats and we'll actually have an investigation and see, because there had been rumors, long had been rumors that maybe President Clinton had been involved with Epstein, maybe some other high-profile people. Although having said that, one of the reasons that has often been given for not releasing a lot of these emails and the information is to protect the victims. Some of the victims have come forward and so forth, so maybe they don't need to be protected, but perhaps there are others that do.
Okay. Now, a vote in the House of Representatives on releasing these files, as I understand, is planned for next week. What do you think the kind of political damage could result for Trump if the Republican-controlled House votes in favour, as it seems to be looking like it will do?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting about this is that we're starting to see some Republicans that also want to have that information released. And again, that's not entirely surprising. Some Republicans have believed that whether it's former President Clinton or other high-profile Democrats were also involved with Epstein. And so they wanted to have Epstein, the information on Epstein released as well, and were suspicious of his suicide and so forth. And so it wouldn't be entirely surprising for them to do so. But then it does, as you suggest, put up perhaps a bit of a conflict between the executive and legislative branches in terms of what they're going to do going forward. One thing I'd also say, too, is one argument that always seems pretty convincing to me is that if there's really anything that was particularly damaging to Trump, it probably would have been leaked by now, particularly before the 2024 election or even earlier than that. But still, that doesn't mean that maybe that has to do with anything directly linking Trump to Epstein, but maybe there's still other things that might be embarrassing or cause political fallout. So the bottom line is we just have to wait and see if, in fact, we do get to see what's in those emails.
And what's the public's expectation of this? Because there does seem to be a momentum pushing for more transparency around these files among the public.
There certainly is among some legislators, and certainly among the pundit class, that a number of people on the left and the right want to see this for their own reasons, either to get Trump or to get Democrats, whatever it happens to be. I'm not so sure that the average voter really cares that much about it. Yeah, they probably like to know what's going on, and they hear the back and forth about it. But again, it's even though we're still a ways away from the midterm elections here, it's still a matter of the economy, affordability. We had a big drop in the stock market in the last couple of days. Other things that are going on, what's happening with tariffs. I think those economic issues are still paramount for most voters, especially as we come up to the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States and people are talking about how much it costs for a traditional Thanksgiving dinner and so forth. And so, yeah, the economic issues are still going to be first in the minds of most voters rather than the Epstein files.
Thanks so much for that, Timothy Hagle. He is Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Iowa. Thank you.